The face in the window. I first noticed the face in the window because it wasn't doing anything. That sounds strange, but movement is what usually catches your eye. A flicker, a shadow, something passing by where it shouldn't. This was the opposite. Perfect stillness. Framed neatly in the second-floor window of the house across the street. I was washing a mug at the kitchen sink when I happened to look up. It was late, close to midnight, the hour when the neighborhood settled into a low hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog that couldn't sleep. My apartment lights were on, which meant the glass reflected my own face faintly, layered over the view outside. At first, I thought the face was mine. The angle was wrong, though. Too high, too far back. And as I leaned closer to the window, the reflection shifted, but the other face didn't. It stayed exactly where it was. Across the street, the house was dark except for that one window. The room behind it wasn't lit. No lamp, no glow. Just a pale oval suspended in blackness, as if the glass itself had decided to remember someone. I set the mug down slowly. The face looked human. That was the unsettling part. No distortion, no obvious wrongness. It had eyes, a nose, a mouth, all arranged correctly. The expression was neutral, relaxed, like someone resting their face against the window pane without pressing hard enough to leave marks. It wasn't staring at me. It was staring past me. That made my stomach tighten. I told myself it was a trick of light, a curtain fold, a reflection from somewhere behind me. I turned and checked the apartment. Everything was normal, empty, quiet. When I turned back, the face was still there. I stood at the sink for a full minute, watching. My heart beat steadily, not racing yet, as my brain searched for explanations. A neighbor pulling a prank, someone standing in the dark, a mannequin head, anything solid. I raised my hand and waved once, small and hesitant. The face didn't react. It didn't blink. That was when I realized something else. The window was too high. The house across the street was older, built before modern safety codes. The second floor sat higher than most. I'd watched movers struggle to get furniture up those stairs when someone new moved in years ago. For a person to stand where that face was, they would have needed to be unnaturally tall, or standing on something. I stepped back from the sink, my pulse finally quickening. I reached for my phone on the counter, more for comfort than anything else. The screen lit up my hands, bright and familiar. When I looked back up, the face was gone. The window was just a window again, dark, empty, reflecting faint streetlight and the silhouettes of tree branches. I exhaled shakily and laughed under my breath. "Okay," I said aloud to the empty kitchen. Enough. I finished washing the mug without looking up again. That night, I slept poorly. Not because I felt watched, at least not consciously, but because my dreams kept stalling. I would be walking somewhere familiar, then stop abruptly, unable to remember why I'd been going there. Each time, I woke with the faint impression that I'd been interrupted. In the morning, sunlight softened everything. The house across the street looked harmless in daylight. Peeling paint, sagging porch, curtains drawn in most windows. The second-floor window where I'd seen the face reflected nothing but sky. I told myself I'd imagined it. That worked until the following night. I was brushing my teeth when the familiar pull made me glance toward the window again. I didn't want to. The urge felt involuntary, like a reflex I hadn't agreed to. The face was back. Same place, same position, same stillness. This time, the eyes were closed. I stood there, toothbrush hanging uselessly from my mouth, foam sliding down my chin. The closed eyes made it worse somehow, like it wasn't watching, It was waiting. I watched long enough to see the eyelids lift. Slowly, deliberately, the eyes opened and focused. Not scanning, not searching, but settling directly on me. I felt the moment it happened like a physical thing, a click behind my ribs. The face smiled. Just a little. I spat toothpaste into the sink and stumbled back, heart slamming against my chest. When I looked again, the window was empty. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I tried to learn more about the house. It wasn't abandoned. It wasn't listed for sale. According to public records, it belonged to an elderly man who'd lived there alone for decades. No recent complaints. No police calls. No obituaries. I walked past it that afternoon on purpose, pretending to check my phone while I looked up at the windows. Up close, the house smelled like old wood and damp leaves. The glass was dusty, opaque enough that you couldn't see clearly inside. There was no sign of anyone home. No car in the driveway, no lights on, no movement behind the curtains. That night, I didn't look. I stayed away from the window entirely, keeping my back to it while I cooked, ate, and watched television. I felt ridiculous, but also relieved. If I didn't see it, maybe it couldn't see me. Just before midnight, the power flickered. Not a full outage, just a blink. Lights dimmed, then returned. And in that brief darkness, I felt certain, absolutely certain, that something had moved closer. I didn't turn around. I stood perfectly still, counting my breaths until the feeling eased. When I finally worked up the nerve to look, the window was empty. I told myself that was a victory. I was wrong. The face didn't appear every night after that. It appeared when I forgot to check, when I got distracted, when I relaxed, when I started to believe it had stopped. Sometimes it was farther back from the glass, sometimes closer, features sharper, more defined. Once, I saw condensation fog the window around it as if it were breathing, always still, always waiting. And slowly, over the course of weeks, I realized something that made my fear settle into something colder and heavier. The face wasn't watching me live my life. It was watching me notice it. Because on the nights I didn't look at the window at all, on the nights I fell asleep on the couch, or went to bed early, or lost track of time, I dreamed of standing in that dark room across the street, inches from the glass, looking out, waiting for someone to finally see me. After that realization, I stopped trusting my own sense of where I was. I would wake in the middle of the night, convinced I was standing at the window, only to find myself still in bed, sheets twisted around my legs. The apartment felt unfamiliar in those moments, like a place I'd just moved into and hadn't learned yet. Corners were wrong. Distances felt off. The window became the problem. During the day, it was just glass. At night, it felt active, like an opening instead of a barrier. I started closing the blinds before sunset, then the curtains on top of them. I told myself it was for privacy. I told myself a lot of things. It didn't help. I could feel when the face was there, not by seeing it, by pressure, a subtle awareness, like standing too close to the edge of something high. Even with the blinds shut, even with the lights off, I knew when that second-floor window across the street was occupied. The first time it happened without sight, I was sitting on the couch reading. A sudden, quiet certainty settled in my chest. It's here. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the page, forcing myself to finish the paragraph. The words blurred. My heart beat faster. Behind the blinds, the glass creaked. Just once, a soft sound, like someone shifting their weight. I stood up so fast the book fell to the floor. I backed away from the window until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. I stayed there until the feeling eased. until the pressure drained away like air from a sealed room. That night, I dreamed I was blind. Not darkness, blankness. Like the concept of seeing had been removed. I stood somewhere narrow and close, hands pressed against cold glass, feeling vibrations through it. Movement on the other side. Warmth. Life. I woke gasping, my palms tingling as if I'd really touched something. I tried to change my routine after that. I went out more in the evenings. I slept with the TV on. I rearranged the furniture so the window wasn't in my direct line of sight anywhere in the apartment. The face adapted. I started seeing it in reflections. Not clearly, never fully. A pale suggestion in the black screen of my phone when it was off. A shape in the microwave door late at night. Once, faintly, in the dark surface of my bathroom mirror while I brushed my teeth. Each time, when I turned fully to look, there was nothing there. But the sense of being observed lingered heavier each time. I began losing time in small, unsettling ways. I would stand at the sink, then realize the water had been running for several minutes. I'd sit down to check a message and look up to find the room dark, hours gone. The gaps weren't large enough to panic over, but they were frequent enough to erode my confidence in myself. One morning, I found fingerprints on the inside of the window. They were faint, barely visible unless the light hit them just right. Smudges at eye level. Too high to be mine. I scrubbed the glass until my arms ached. When I finished, the window looked clean, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd only wiped one side of something. I finally broke and talked to someone about it. Not a doctor, not the police, a friend. Someone who would listen without immediately calling it stress or hallucination. I described the face, the dreams, the sense of pressure. I left out the worst parts. The feeling that sometimes I was the one being watched from inside the apartment. My friend listened quietly, then asked a question that hadn't occurred to me. "Are you sure it's across the street?" The words landed hard. "What do you mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "You only ever see it through glass, right? Windows, reflections, screens." I felt cold spread through my stomach. That night, I tested the idea. I waited until the familiar pressure returned, until I was certain the face was there. I stood in the middle of the living room, breathing slowly, then turned. Not toward the window, but toward the dark television screen. For a moment, I saw only my own reflection. Then the glass darkened, deepening, like the room behind it wasn't mine anymore. A face resolved slowly in the black, closer than it had ever been. Not across the street. Inside my apartment, it wasn't pressed to the glass. It hovered just behind the surface, as if the screen were a thin barrier holding it back. The features were clearer now, eyes too intent, expression quietly hopeful. It smiled, not at me, at itself. I screamed and knocked the TV over, the crash shattering the image. The pressure vanished instantly, like a switch flipped. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor, lights on, back against the wall, trying to understand what I'd just seen. By morning, the conclusion was unavoidable. The face didn't belong to the house across the street. It belonged to the space between looking and being seen. And every time I noticed it, every time I acknowledged it, whether through glass, reflection, or dream, I was giving it somewhere closer to stand. I packed a bag that afternoon. I told myself I just needed distance. A few nights away, a reset. As I zipped the bag shut, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. For a split second, my eyes were closed. I don't remember blinking, and behind my reflection, faint but unmistakable, the outline of another face waited patiently in the dark. closer than ever before. I left before sunset. I didn't turn the lights off. I didn't check the locks twice. I grabbed my bag, my phone, my keys, and walked out like I was afraid the apartment might notice hesitation. The hallway felt longer than usual, the air thick and close, like I was moving through something that didn't want to be parted. I stayed with a friend across town, a different building, different street, different angles. I told myself that mattered. The first night, I slept. Not well, but enough. No dreams of glass, no pressure behind my eyes. When I woke, the room felt solid, anchored. I stayed there all day, answering messages, pretending everything was fine. By evening, the familiar sense of relief started to curdle. It wasn't gone. It was just quieter, like something waiting in the next room instead of standing over me. I avoided reflective surfaces on instinct. I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. I turned my phone face down on the table. When my friend asked why I was acting strange, I blamed stress and work and left it at that. That night, while she slept, I lay awake listening to the house settle. It wasn't my apartment. The sounds were wrong. Pipes knocked where mine didn't. The floor creaked under weight that wasn't there. I told myself those differences were proof that I was safe. Then, around 2 a.m., I felt it. The pressure, fainter than before, but unmistakable. A quiet awareness, like someone standing just outside the room, close enough that you can sense their presence through the wall. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the ceiling and slowed my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale like I'd learned to do when panic crept in. The pressure eased slightly, then settled again. It wanted attention. That was the rule now. I understood it well enough to be afraid of it. The next morning, my friend asked if I'd been up during the night. No, I said too quickly. She frowned. I thought I heard someone standing by my bedroom door. I didn't ask for details. I left that afternoon and checked into a cheap hotel instead. Anonymous, neutral, nothing personal on the walls. No framed art behind glass. No mirrors except the bathroom, which I covered immediately with a towel. For 2 nights, nothing happened. By the third, the dreams returned. I stood in unfamiliar rooms, staring out through windows that didn't belong to me. Each time, the glass was thick and warped, bending the world beyond it. I pressed my hands against it, feeling warmth on the other side. Presence. When I woke, my palms tingled. On the 4th night, I noticed something small and terrible. The towel over the bathroom mirror was damp, not from steam. I hadn't showered. It was damp in the center, like someone had pressed their face against the glass for a long time, breathing slowly. I left the hotel that morning without checking out properly. I stopped trying to run after that. Distance didn't matter. New rooms didn't matter. The face wasn't tied to a place anymore. It was tied to the act of looking, and to me. I started experimenting carefully. I avoided glass entirely when I could. I wore sunglasses indoors if there were reflective surfaces I couldn't cover. I kept my phone on audio-only mode, never letting the screen go fully dark. It helped, not completely, but enough. The pressure came less often. The dreams grew weaker. The sense of being watched receded to a dull background hum. Until one evening, weeks later, when exhaustion finally got the better of me. I'd been staring at my phone too long. My eyes burned. My head ached. Without thinking, I locked the screen and set it down. The glass went black, and there it was. Not fully formed, not yet. Just the suggestion of a face emerging from the dark surface, like an image developing slowly. I snatched the phone up and turned it back on, heart racing. The pressure spiked. I felt it then, clearly, unmistakably. It wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to finish. That night, I understood the final part of it. The face wasn't an entity waiting to cross over. It was a version of me that existed only when observed, a reflection that learned from being noticed, that gained detail and depth each time I acknowledged it, consciously or not. The dreams, the lost time, the moments when my eyes closed without my permission. Those weren't attacks. They were rehearsals. I began to suspect that when it finally became clear enough, real enough, it wouldn't be behind glass anymore. It would be standing where I was, and I would be the one watching from the other side. I didn't know how long I had left. I only knew that every reflective surface was a risk now, and that eventually I would make a mistake. Everyone does. Because you can't live your life without looking at something that looks back. And the closer it got, the more patient it became. Like it already knew how this ended. Like it had been waiting its entire existence for me to look just a second too long. I stopped sleeping altogether after that. Not deliberately. My body just refused. Every time I closed my eyes, even for a second, I felt that subtle shift, the sensation of awareness sliding, of something else taking the opportunity I'd given it. So I stayed awake. I drank coffee. I paced. I kept lights on at all hours and sound playing softly in the background so silence couldn't settle into focus. The world thinned when you don't sleep. Edges blur. Thoughts loop. Reflections feel deeper than they should. I knew I was making myself vulnerable, but exhaustion felt safer than surrender. On the fifth night, it happened anyway. I was standing in the bathroom of the hotel, washing my hands. The mirror was still covered, the towel hanging heavy and damp no matter how often I replaced it. I kept my eyes down, watching the water run over my fingers. Then I felt it. Not pressure this time. Alignment. Like two things slipping into the same place. My hands stopped moving. The water kept running. I became intensely aware of my breathing. Slow, shallow, perfectly synchronized with something else. I didn't look up. I knew better. But the sensation grew stronger, not threatening, not urgent, familiar, comfortable, like settling into a position you've practiced for a long time. You don't have to do this anymore, the feeling suggested. My eyes burned. My vision dimmed at the edges. I realized then what the face had been waiting for all along. Not attention, permission. I turned the water off and backed away from the sink, one careful step at a time, keeping my gaze low. The floor tiles felt distant, unreal, like I was already halfway elsewhere. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. I hadn't heard it ring. I hadn't felt it vibrate before now. Just that single, soft buzz, like a reminder. Against my better judgment, I pulled it out. The screen was dark. In the black glass, my reflection stared back at me. Only it wasn't matching my expression. Its eyes were open wider than mine. Its mouth was relaxed in a way mine wasn't. Calm. Certain. Behind it, behind me, there was depth. Not the bathroom, not the hotel room. Something closer, smaller, framed. A window. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor face down, the image gone, but the sensation didn't leave. It surged instead, rushing through me like a tide finally allowed to come in. I staggered back against the wall, heart pounding. "No," I whispered. "You don't get to replace me." The pressure wavered. I understood then that the face wasn't stronger than me. It was emptier. It needed me to stop filling my own place. I did the only thing I hadn't tried yet. I closed my eyes, fully, deliberately, and focused inward. Not on the face, Not on the glass, on memory, on weight, on pain, on all the messy, uncomfortable parts of being present that I'd been avoiding for weeks. I thought of things I hated remembering, embarrassments, regrets, losses, the sharp edges of being alive that don't reflect cleanly in glass. The pressure recoiled. I felt it pull away, and not in anger, but in confusion, like a shape losing definition without something smooth to cling to. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, breathing hard, eyes still closed, grounding myself in sensation. Cold tile, aching muscles, the throb of my pulse. When I finally opened my eyes, the room was just a room again. The towel still covered the mirror. The phone lay dark and silent on the floor. I slept that night. Real sleep. Heavy and dreamless. When I woke, the sense of being watched was gone. Not weakened. Gone. I didn't test it. I didn't look for reflections. I didn't check windows. I left the hotel, went back to my apartment, and opened every blind in the place in broad daylight. The house across the street looked the same as it always had. No face. Days passed. Then weeks. I started sleeping normally again. The gaps in my attention returned to what they'd always been. Harmless, human. I caught my reflection in mirrors and windows without flinching. But I learned something that hasn't left me. I don't linger in reflections anymore. I don't stare into dark screens. I don't look at windows at night longer than I need to. And when I feel that old, familiar pull, the urge to check, to confirm, to see if something is still there, I move instead. Because I know now that some things don't exist until they're noticed. And some versions of you are perfectly content to wait behind the glass, learning your shape, learning your habits, hoping you'll grow tired enough to let them take over. So if you ever catch your reflection doing something you didn't mean to do, if your eyes close when you don't remember blinking, don't look closer. Look away. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more long-form horror narrations. You have been listening to American Haunted Tales.
Thank you for watching.